It would not be a stretch to say that Daredevil Season 1, 3, and the first half of Season 2 are some of the best pieces of Marvel television ever made. They were originally a part of Marvel's initiative to create more drama-based shows on platforms like Netflix, and it's safe to say that Daredevil was the best among them. Season 1 was fantastic. A grounded crime thriller exploring a compelling mystery with Matt facing off against a mysterious new crime boss. The first half of Season 2 had him facing off against a chaotic and unstoppable vigilante that would stop at nothing for his revenge. And Season 3 was a cathartic and heartbreaking exploration of Matt Murdock losing his way and his faith, and the journey it took to regain it by fighting a demon that had once again crawled back into power. Daredevil was brilliant in its portrayal of the world and its characters. There was inventive and grounded action scenes, ones people still talk about to this day, brilliant use of non-superhero elements through great character work and courtroom scenes, and the inventive use of Daredevil's powers were some of the best in the MCU. Unfortunately, despite the popularity of the show, Daredevil would be cancelled thanks to the Netflix deal falling apart, making it so we would never see how the story would continue, let alone finish. Then, years later, Marvel announced a new Daredevil series. It was called Born Again, and on the surface, it was everything fans had been waiting for. But as details began to emerge, it became clear that this wasn't gonna be a simple conclusion. In fact, the road to Born Again was far more complicated than anyone expected. Originally, after the success of Daredevil Season 3, a fourth season was immediately pitched to follow up the plot of the third season. The Owl was meant to be the villain of this hypothetical Season 4. He was the son of Leland Owsley, one of Fisk's business partners from the first season. After his father's untimely death, this son would seek to become the new kingpin of New York. There was also Mary Walker, who would come in as a love interest in Season 4. She was present in the Iron Fist series, and her character explores the idea of alternate personalities that would make her an erratic and dangerous person for Matt Murdock to deal with. A story of psychological tension. At the end of Daredevil Season 3, we saw Benjamin Poindexter in an operating room as doctors tried to fix his spinal issue. You'd think that would mean that Bullseye would fully come in as the antagonist of Season 4. However, that was not entirely the case. Bullseye was never intended to be the antagonist of the fourth season. He was being saved for a hypothetical Season 5, where he'd fully transition into the villain. In a way, Season 3 only served as an origin story for who he'd eventually become. But then the cancellation happened, and for years, that was it. The story was over. After Daredevil's cancellation, Marvel was legally barred from using the character within the MCU for a few years. But once the legal barring ended, Daredevil started making appearances in Marvel films and Disney Plus shows. For fans of the Netflix series, there was a clear and major difference between how he was portrayed in the MCU compared to the Netflix shows. In his appearances in the She-Hulk show, Daredevil was a lot more charismatic and emotive.
Wait, didn't you tell me that before we fought?
Why didn't you ask me before immediately trying to whoop my ass?
He joked around a lot, and he even seemed easygoing. There was also moments where he'd show up in broad daylight, bantering with various people. It was clear that Daredevil within the MCU would no longer be the serious and brooding version seen in the Netflix series. This would create some division, as some fans heavily missed the version from the Netflix show. However, based on his appearance in the Echo series, it was obvious that Daredevil could still be very serious, depending on the creative team that was attached to him. Another different element was the action scenes. Daredevil within the MCU had this very exaggerated and acrobatic way of moving around, engaging in complicated flips and combat moves we've never even seen him pull off in the Netflix show. These elements were one of many taken directly from the comics. So with how Daredevil was portrayed in She-Hulk and the Echo series, it was pretty evident how he'd be shown in a hypothetical new season. More jokey, more charismatic, and more elaborate with the action. And then the announcement came. Daredevil Born Again was officially in development. development, but given what we'd seen of the character, fans had a reason to be nervous. The new Daredevil show was created with the intention that it would be a brand new series altogether, one that was not tied down by what happened in the Netflix shows. This meant that characters had vaguely experienced events from the previous 3 seasons, but those previous seasons would not have major influence or effect on what happened in this new series. There are some things we know about this original Born Again, story-wise. Foggy would have been killed off-screen by a corrupt cop. Karen would basically be written out entirely. Bullseye had no kind of role in the story, and the action and set pieces would be a lot more exaggerated and fantastical to reflect this new style in the Disney Plus shows. The comedy would have likely been more exaggerated, and Wilson Fisk would have already been the mayor in the story. This new Daredevil show, Daredevil Born Again, was in production for quite a while, long enough that 6 episodes were filmed. However, production would shut down once the writer's strike of America began in 2023. When the writer's strike started, Marvel and Kevin Feige would begin evaluating their current roster of Marvel shows, including Daredevil Born Again. When he took a look at Born Again in its current state, he realized the show did not work at all. Tonally, it was dramatically different from the Netflix series, likely taking on a more lighthearted tone the MCU was known for. Born Again likely utilized many elements of Daredevil we saw in his appearances within Disney+. Basically, Daredevil was nothing like his Netflix counterpart, leading to a dramatic retooling of the whole show. The original writers were let go to bring in new ones that would retool the series to be more accurate in tone to the Netflix show, and a new showrunner would come in. So what happened? Well, when the new creative team came in, the goal became clear: bring Born Again back in line with the Netflix series that fans had fallen in love with, bringing back major characters whom the original writers had effectively left out, including Karen Page and Frank Castle. The retooled show aimed for something closer to the grounded, gritty feel of the Netflix era, but this did not mean abandoning everything new. The challenge was finding a balance, keeping the heightened, stylized action that the MCU version of Daredevil had introduced, while maintaining the emotional weight and moral complexity that made the original series so compelling. The premise for the final season 1 reflected this balancing act. Kingpin runs for mayor of New York City and wants to bring order, all while Matt has to avoid using his Daredevil powers out of fear of being arrested, representing a local hero while facing off against the corrupt police. It felt grounded, like season 1 and season 3. Matt Murdock was once again facing an uphill battle against an insurmountable threat, this time the soon-to-be mayor of New York City. What we got with this final version of Born Again is a show that feels tonally consistent with the previous seasons, but adds its own MCU flair to the narrative. But the show isn't without its flaws. There's a very straightforward path we expect the series to take, but then it radically veers from it. This comes through characters like Muse, who just didn't need to be in the show. Despite these issues, the retooled approach has led to a season 2 that picks up months after season 1's finale, and so far, I've really been enjoying it, as it seems like a massive step up from the first season.